Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, everybody. My name is Ryan Thomas, and I am joined by Matt Parrino, and we are going to dive into some players that might be the apple of the Buffalo Bills' eye, if that makes sense. Matt, who are some guys that you think Buffalo should go after or potentially could go after?
Free agency, draft, what do you want me to start?
Actually, free agency. Being that free agency is about a week and a half away?
Yeah, I mean, next Wednesday. So
next Wednesday?
We're
a week away. Wow.
Week away, yeah.
Man, it really did sneak up.
It just everything's sneaking up on us, right?
Yeah, this is unreal.
I know. But, obviously there's a report. We talked a little bit about there's a report out today that the Bills are going to go, and the Giants are going to go after Darrell Williams, right tackle from Carolina. And I think that that's got to be probably your top target. I mean, I really believe that, fixing your offensive line starts at the center position. I think that the Bills lost a ton when Eric Wood retired, and they haven't been able to replace that. And I think that's important. There's a couple options there, but I think Darrell Williams is like the elite of this entire offensive line class, a guy that has the potential to be, a top 3 or 4 tackle in the league at that position. And it's dependent on what you want to do. So Brandon Beane's philosophy is, let me fill holes that I have in free agency so that I can go into the draft and go ahead and get the best player available. Well, Sean McDermott came out and told us last week that that's great, but it's also a combination of things. It's where you're drafting, it's what you need, and it's about getting the best player available. So if the best player available at 9 is Kyler Murray, which, by the way, that's not going to probably be the case because it's looking like he's going to go number 1 overall. But if that's who's the number 1 guy on the board when you pick, well, you have Josh Allen. So you're not going to take the best player on the board. You're going to take the best player on the board who's also a fit for your team. So where are the Bills' biggest need? Wide receiver, offensive line. And I think you can go out and get a guy like Darrell Williams, right tackle, and really stabilize that team. Now, if the Bills go out and get Darrell Williams at right tackle, that shows you that they also have serious and significant belief in Deion Dawkins as their left tackle of the future, which has been a bit up in question. He came out after the season and said that, he wasn't particularly thrilled with his sophomore season, and he has a lot of work to do to get back on track. And even Sean McDermott said at the end of the year, there's got to be some development and better play at that spot. But if you have those two guys, then you can go into the draft and then maybe try to start to fit things together. Also in free agency, there's 2 centers that every Bills fan should know about on the market right now. Mitch Morse from Kansas City. He blocked for Patrick Mahomes, who set a record last year, or put up 50-plus touchdowns last year, a record-breaking season in Kansas City. And then Matt Paradis from Denver, the 2 top centers in the league. Listen, all 3 of these guys, they're going to cost a lot of money, and the Bills said that they want to be judicious in free agency as opposed to aggressive. But I think that if you can get a top elite offensive lineman at one of these spots, you have to do it. And I think that, that's the strength of this free agent class. A lot of the defensive guys, the pass rushers, the defensive tackles, they've been franchised. You look at Grady Jarrett in Atlanta, DeMarcus Lawrence in Dallas, Jadeveon Clowney in Houston. They're all going back to their teams. So you look at then, on the offensive side where some needs exist, and those are the guys that I'm really pinpointing for the Bills.
Matt Paradis, they're saying, will command around $10-11 million a year. Because there's going to be so many suitors for him, there might potentially be a bidding war for his services. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And then as far as Williams goes, a guy that's fairly young for a free agent tackle to be out there on the market, 26 years old, had an injury last year where he didn't really play much last season. Are you a little bit, I don't want to say scared, but are you a little bit skeptical as to Williams coming off of this injury that he had? I'm a little bit, only because I'm not too high on paying players a lot of money that are coming off a big injury, but who's to say that Williams isn't healthy right now?
Right, and actually, Williams is coming off an injury. Paradis is coming off a broken leg.
Right.
Mitch Morris has had a career history of concussions. So there's a lot of question marks with all three of those guys. But I think that if you're the Bills, that's not my job to figure out, if they're going to get medically cleared. That's on the Bills and their staff and their front office and their scouts. There's history in this league where you can look at guys that have come off the injuries that these two guys have suffered and figure out, what are the expectations, what are the probabilities. I think there's enough interest from everything that I've read online around the league that, it doesn't seem like too many teams are that concerned. So I think you got to go out and get the guy that you think can make the biggest impact. And even coming off an injury, the offensive line play was so bad for the Bills last year. I can't imagine that.
It can't be much worse.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, obviously you'd be paying a lot more money, but, there's some results there. I mean, with Paradis, you're talking about a guy that won a Super Bowl in 2015 blocking in front of Peyton Manning. And that's, there's not really, to bring that into a locker room, a very young locker room that's looking for leaders with Kyle Williams moving on and, Josh Allen pretty much the leader on the offensive side of the ball. I think adding a guy like Paradis who brings that leadership would be, of the utmost importance to this front office.
It would be great to kind of cross those two positions off the positional need list, so that way they could head into the draft and maybe, just maybe, draft a skill position player. You might know where I'm going with this, you might not, but a guy that really just my eyeballs were popping out of my head watching the scouting combine was DK Metcalf. What do you think about? I got a lot of Bills fans sending me emails into the mailbag for the podcast. Ryan, what do you think about DK Metcalf? I like him, but I'd like to know what your take is on Metcalf.
There's two things that he brings. That obviously the unreal physical tools, the size is apparent just from looking at a picture of the guy, and it makes you think of some of the best to do it. A Julio Jones, a Megatron. Guys that have the speed but also have the physicality to be great every down wide receivers in this league. But there's a couple things here. Number one, some of the experts, as you dig into, the film study that they do, they don't have rave reviews. I mean, you look across the internet, and some of these guys don't even have DK Metcalf as their top receiver ranked in this draft. Now, listen, the guy ran a 4.33 40. He's a big physical specimen. Are you telling me that doesn't immediately bolster the Bills' wide receiver core? I'm not necessarily sure I'm ready to say that, but you have to figure out what's the value there. What's the value at adding a guy with some significant question marks at number 9? There's some question marks about the depth of his ability to run routes. How poised is he? How experienced is he? How much does he know? Now, he can be coached up, but that's one thing. He's coming off of a neck injury. Is he going to be prone to injuries at the next level? Mm-hmm. There are some question marks around him that I think that, if you're, and then you take into account Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott's comments about the receiver position this last week, and that's my red flags up to me too.
Right.
I don't think that they're actually in the market or looking necessarily for a number one wide receiver, because what does number one wide receiver bring? It brings,
diva.
Diva. It brings that kind of, that entitlement into the locker room, which is completely opposite. And that's what's making me think that I don't think they're in the market for an Antonio Brown either. There's 3 mysterious teams that have entered the fold as of today. They're expecting a deal this week. Experts are
Friday, right?
Insiders are expecting it, but I just don't think that this regime values that spot. I think that they said over and over again, you build a championship level team from the inside out. You start at the line and you move your way out. They have their quarterback now. Now they have some work to do on both sides of the ball. You talk about the defensive line. There's some question marks. You lose Kyle Williams, who was huge for them last year, even on the field, not just from a leadership perspective. He had
on the field. He had a great year. Yes, yeah.
Jerry Hughes is in a contract year. Shaq Lawson, they're probably not going to pony up the money to pay him after his next year. He's a Rex Ryan guy, or Doug Welly guy, I should say. So there's there's some serious question marks in that line. They bring back Jordan Phillips, which is something I thought was a good move to bring him back on a prove it deal. But is he a starter? Is he of starter caliber? I'm not necessarily sure, and there's still some question marks when it comes to Harrison Phillips. I think Starlo Tulele did some good things last year. I think he does what they brought him here to do, even though it doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But there's some things that they need to address. If there's an Ed Oliver there at number 9, a Christian Wilkins from Clemson, who I'm told really screams Sean McDermott type of player, you really have to consider that they might go in that direction. And I don't know. I struggle to think that they're gonna go after the wide receiver spot at number 9. But they traded up to get Zay Jones in the second round. So we'll see. There's so many different options. That's a fun part about all this, right, Ryan? That's why we're putting out all of this off-season content, is because there's a lot
of different angles for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's you made me look smart, because in the first mock draft that I posted, I had Buffalo getting Ed Oliver 9th overall and passing on DK Metcalf, who went in the teens. Everybody's saying, with this combine, you think he'll slip past 10th overall? Maybe not. Maybe there is a team out there like, the Raiders that are notoriously known for taking receivers just based on their 40 times. I don't know if they'll do that this time now that they got a new regime, but I find it interesting that, yes, they did re-sign Jordan Phillips, and he did fill a vital role for them, and he did somewhat resurrect his career here, and they did sign him to a prove-it deal, but they need some depth on the defensive side of the ball, too. A linebacker, I love Lorenzo Allen. He'd have my vote for mayor of Buffalo if he decided to run, to be quite honest with you. But I think that they need some depth there, and I think there's a lot of needs across the board. More so, they need bodies rather than particular positions, and that leads me to think that they might trade down. What do you think of the idea of them trading down as well?
I'm 100% in the trade down camp, because you look at the positions of need on this Bills team, and you got offensive line across the board, wide receiver, and tight end. Well, all 3 of those positions are super deep in this draft. So if you can add an additional second-round pick, an additional third-round pick in this class, and really bolster those positions right there early in this draft, then you can even fill more needs as you go along. You got 10 picks already. I just don't know. But here's the caveat to that. It also depends on, Bean and his scouting department. If Oliver falls, if Hawkinson is there, if Jonah Williams is there, DK Metcalf is there, is that something that with the due diligence that they've done, there is enough value in terms of best player on the board that they go after them at 9? I think it's going to be dependent on how this draft plays out in those first 8 picks. I don't think you're going to see a trade down before April 20, whatever the day of the draft is. I think it's going to be, they're going to play this situation, have it play out how it does, similar to last year when they were wheeling and dealing in the first round to get Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds. I think you could see a similar thing this year, and if the player they like falls there, but I don't know, man. I think this draft's too deep in a couple spots for Brandon Beane and company's stomach, leaving some guys on the table.
I completely agree, and they already did we need to get our quarterback, we need to get our middle linebacker. They were in that position they made those moves for a reason. They needed that quarterback, they needed that linebacker. Now they need, as I said, they need bodies at a lot of different positions. They need to spread out the draft a little bit more. And I think for as many, needs as they might have, they're not a bottom 10 team in the National Football League. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think that,
to be picking 9th overall is what I'm saying.
The Buffalo Bills that played their last 6 games or so last season is not a bottom 10 team in this league. I totally am there with you. I think that this offense showed enough. I mean, go back to last year. I mean, if Charles Clay makes that grab in the end zone, who knows what could have happened. I mean, you're talking about 500 football team. So No, I think that there's enough talent on both sides of the ball, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. You're bringing back almost everybody. You're probably going to add another corner, another linebacker, and maybe a couple people to the defensive line. You have one of the best safety combos in the league that are still in their prime, 100%.
Yeah, and as far as free agent wide receivers, because let's just say they don't go the DK Metcalf route, which I don't think they will, but like we're saying, this is all speculation. We don't know until draft night. Who are some free agent wide receivers that you would expect Buffalo to kick the tires on?
I think Golden Tate is a very interesting possibility just because of his experience and his proven playmaking ability. I think last year is kind of a weird year because, to get thrown into a new offense midway through the season, I'm not necessarily going to fault him for maybe some lack of production. And you saw that he still has the ability to make big plays. You go back to that Chicago playoff game and that touchdown when they needed it, connected with Nick Foles. I think there's still some playmaking there. Cole Beasley's a guy that I think is going to want a little bit too much money. Slot guy. Adam Humphries from Tampa Bay, the same as well. I think as you go down that list, Tyrell Williams from Los Angeles Chargers, somebody that a lot of people have linked to the Bills. He's going to want a ton of money, and I'm not sure that the production is there. I'm a big fan of maybe going back down the John Brown route. I think that there was some contract talks last offseason when he eventually signed with the Ravens. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy that, you talk about a slot receiver, a speed demon, a playmaker, versatility. I think Brian Dable could do a lot of things with a John Brown, and he's still in his prime. So I think John Brown would be my top target in terms of free agency, but you got to always think about the Carolina connection when it comes to being a McDermott. And Devin Funchess at 24 years old is going to be on the market. Joe Biscaglia from Channel 7, my buddy. I'm a big Joe B guy.
Oh, yeah.
He put out an article yesterday and he made some really, really good points when it comes to why the Bills should entertain Devin Funchess and bringing him to town. So, there's a lot of options in free agency. I think that, the Bills can do – I think the Bills are going to be active on the market from a wide receiver perspective and also in the draft. I think that they're probably going to draft at least one, if not two players. I'm not necessarily sold on the long-term viability of Ray McCloud. I think that they're going to want to test him in camp next season, and you go out there, get yourself a couple free agents, draft yourself a couple wide receivers, and boom, you got yourself a nice little competition in camp.
There's a wide receiver in this class, and I always forget his name, but he has like 3 names. It's something something else.
J.J. Arcega-Whiteside.
That is it. I knew his last name was like White something. I can't remember what it was, but that guy is somebody that I'd love to see in Buffalo Bills red, white, and blue.
Yeah, I just did a story on him. I spoke to him at the combine. He met with the Bills out there.
That's music to my ears.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy because he's a bigger guy, not the fastest, but a guy that's played every position. In terms of the receiver spot, and he's a guy that he's got it in between the ears. I think that he would buy into the system here, be the type of guy that the Bills would be looking for, and because of his size and his big playability, down the field, could be the perfect combo for a Josh Allen and somebody that you can get, like we talked about earlier, with a little bit more value later on in the draft.
Right, and that's what it's all about, maximizing value at positions of need. And as much as the DK Metcalf combine was just eye-opening and jaw-dropping and everything like that, it would be nice to have a guy that you watch on tape and say to yourself, that guy is a NFL pro's pro. That's what I think of Whiteside when I watch him play. I see him as a solid pro. Maybe he's not the fastest, maybe he's not the strongest, but you could definitely see him existing on an NFL offense.
100%. And he's got the attitude that you want, for a guy to come in and compete. He wants to he talks about earning things and competing and wanting to win, and those are like you said, music to the ears of the Bills.
Right. there was a report that Buffalo also visited with a running back by the name of Bryce Love, who was a big-name prospect in college, had a bad knee injury. What is your take on that as far as Bryce Love visiting with the Bills and the prospects that the Bills might be looking at adding to their running back room?
Yeah, did you read my article today, Ryan?
I did.
Thank you, my friend. He was actually number 2 on my, I did a quick write-up today and just basically pulled out, 18 things that 18 players said at the Combine that I think, from a Bills perspective are interesting. And he said, he did meet with the Bills, and it's funny, he used a Brandon Beane term. He said, we were just talking ball. And, Brandon Beane's always like, we want guys that love ball. And so I'm just thinking there, well, they're going to love Bryce Love because he loves talking ball. But he said, he was asked about potentially backing up LaShawn McCoy, and he said, man, that guy's a legend. In my mind, obviously having the opportunity to play in the NFL is a blessing, but getting the opportunity to play behind McCoy would be something that means a lot to me. And this is a guy that's a playmaker, and, somebody that's going to not necessarily go round 1, 2, or 3, but somebody that you can get later on in the draft with, 2 picks in the 4th, 2 picks in the 5th. That could be a guy that you look at, and, you look at Denver and the success that Phillip Lindsay had as a late round pick last year, and you got to think to yourself, if you're, the Bills, man, we got to throw a dart at the board here at the running back position late. I don't think you can go into next season with LaShawn McCoy, Chris Ivory, and Marcus Murphy as your running back trio. I really do think you need to, get some more playmaking ability and speed mixed into that room. I don't think LaShawn McCoy is the same guy. I'm kind of torn on that a little bit.
Me too.
I understand the Bills thinking and why they're wanting to cling to the idea that he's still the LaShawn McCoy of old, but I saw way too many games last year where he just did not look like the same guy, and there's some stuff late in the season, some attitude stuff that I wasn't a huge fan of, but there was some leadership stuff that I think that he did that stood out to me. So I think that, they're bringing him back. They have the money to bring him back. They could save $7 million about if they got rid of him. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of cap, and I don't think they're going to even spend what they have in space. So, bring him back and see, guys love him. I mean, they voted him captain last year, and everybody that I talked to in that room is a big LaShawn McCoy guy. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think, too, they want to see it through. Maybe, just maybe, they see it as if we keep him on this offseason, he could be somebody that would be a major, somewhat recruiting piece for other free agents because he's well known around the National Football League. He's very respected amongst players that are in the National Football League or players that are about to be in the National Football League. So maybe they see LaShawn McCoy as somewhat of a name player that could somewhat maybe not necessarily recruit, but kind of just bring attention to the team that they really need in terms of bringing free agents into Buffalo.
Oh, I totally agree, Ryan. It's a great take because he's a guy that's revered around the league. Even last year when he was struggling, guys were like, hold up. I mean, that's LaShawn McCoy. I mean, that dude's a legend, and, he garners a lot of respect in the league for what he's been able to do on the field. So, yeah, 100%. When guys are talking about coming to Buffalo, it's a feather in your cap to say that, you got a guy like LaShawn McCoy who is under a long-term deal here that's, kind of the faces of the franchise. And, yeah, 100%, I'm right there with you.
They've been able to really bring in, between, quote-unquote Mick Bean, Brandon Bean, and Sean McDermott, they've really been able to bring in players that I won't say are the biggest name players, but they're players that fit the mold of what they are looking for in terms of personality and work ethic and drive. But they're players that have actually fit the scheme. And I know that sounds so obvious, but so many Bills regimes have come and gone where they've tried to force feed us a big name free agent like a Mario Williams or swing for the fences for a Sammy Watkins, where it seems like Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have added solid, underrated pieces to this team via free agency in the offseason and even in the regular season.
Right. And, no, I agree there. I think that there is a perception around the league when it comes to playing in Buffalo, that's not the best perception of the city and things, the things that there are to do here or lack thereof. So I think that, in the past, you talk about big-time free agents, they've had to overspend to entice people to come here. Mario Williams, I think people forget a little bit. When Mario Williams came here, he was still pretty good.
Oh, yeah, he was very good, yeah.
Yeah. He was a pretty coveted free agent when they signed him. Now, did they have to pay more to get him, and did he live up to the contract? Not really. It's kind of the same thing with Jadeveon Clowney. I think if they didn't franchise tag him in Houston, if he hit the open market, is he a guy that's going to approach 15 sacks every year? He really hasn't done that. But when he's on the field, he's a monster.
He's a force.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think I think it's the approach has been for Bean since he's been here has been to fix the cap, to do surgery on the cap, get all the bad contracts out of here, operate with some dead money for a few years until you can get that cap number to where you want it to be and then start to spend. I don't think he's going to be afraid to spend, and I think he'll spend in the right places. You look at Darrell Williams, who's his guy. You look at the Kelvin Benjamin trade last year. He spent on that trade.
He did.
He gave up a third round pick for Kelvin Benjamin. In hindsight, that was a costly thing to pay for what Kelvin Benjamin ended up bringing to this team. So I don't necessarily think that they won't pay, but I think that he is going to be, like he said, much more calculated in how he spends. And I think that you talk about a huge need like offensive line, specifically right tackle, and how bad Jordan Mills was for the most part last year. And I think you could see some money spent at that spot.
Right tackle was a position that definitely was not good with Jordan Mills. No offense to him, not trying to throw shade, but they definitely need an improvement there. Right guard, John Miller. What's the story on that? It looks like he's on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I don't think John Miller is going to be back. He's had some very cryptic Instagram story posts, kind of motivating type of stuff. I don't get the sense that they're really keen on bringing back any of those guys. And I think that John Miller, he's got some potential still. I think that, he's had moments where he's been pretty good, so he might command some money on the open market for a team that loses out on some of these bigger free agents. And I don't think the Bills, after everything they've seen from him over the last 2 years, want to commit any significant money there. So I think that you'll see Ryan Groy gone, Mills and Miller gone, and I think that you're going to want to bring in a center, whether it be through the draft and free agency. I think they can live with Russell Bodine's contract as the backup center, but I think if you go into 2019 with Russell Bodine as your starting center, you got real problems still, despite what other moves they can make on this line.
Right. They can't allow that to happen because they see it as year 2 with Josh Allen is year 2 of surrounding Josh Allen with as much talent as they possibly can. And there's 2 teams that come to mind in terms of teams that have really revamped their rosters on offense, especially. Both were in the playoffs last year. The one was in the Super Bowl, the Rams and the Bears. Look what they did with, drafting Jared Goff. They surrounded him with talent. And Mitch Trubisky, they surrounded him with talent. So Buffalo just has to follow that blueprint.
Yeah, 100%. I talked to a Bears beat reporter last year about all of that, about the way they built around Mitch Trubisky, and they added a couple wide receiver pieces and built up the offensive line, and he's got a couple real potent weapons and like a 1-2 punch in Jordan
Howard,
Jordan Howard and Tarek Cohen. And I think that, you look into the Bills' backfield, and obviously there's some offensive line concerns, but I don't necessarily see a 1-2 punch in Ivory and McCoy that really equate to what they got going on in Chicago. So it goes back to our point. I mean, how are they going to address that? There's a free agent out there in Tevin Coleman that I think would be a phenomenal
I would
fit
love
with the Bills.
that. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, he does it all, right?
Yeah.
He's a guy that has had to play second fiddle to Devonta Freeman for years.
He's waiting for his shot.
Exactly.
Waiting for his shot.
That, coming to the Bills, not the sexiest of free agent destinations, but coming to the Bills, I think that there could potentially be some opportunity, if he were to sign a 3-year deal as the team starter after McCoy, or even while McCoy is here, and McCoy could turn into kind of like a spot home run hitter, and whatever you need that to be, or the Bills can move on altogether if it's not working out early. I think Coleman's got to be, I've seen one expert, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, that said that he preferred Tevin Coleman over Le'Veon Bell. So, I mean, there's a guy that could have a serious market for himself, and if the Bills are looking for another running back, could be a nice ad.
We hear all sorts of things at this time of year. It's all speculation, but with Le'Veon Bell, I've heard that he's a little bit overweight right now. I really hope for his sake that's not the case, and I hope for the team that signs him that that's not the case, and I hope that Buffalo is not that team for a lot of different reasons. I'd love to see Tevin Coleman here, just due to the fact that he's young, he's eager to get his shot, and I thought he was phenomenal last year filling in for Freeman. So I'm all for that. But what type of deal do you think that would be? Do you think they'd be throwing a lot of money at him in order to bring him here?
I mean, he's probably the premier running back on the market outside of Bell. And
right.
Bell, there's only a very small group of teams that you think would even probably entertain Le'Veon Bell at this point. Indianapolis Colts came out and said that they're probably not going to be interested in him. Not really in their model. You think about the Jets and the Raiders as two potential teams that would be fits. But yeah, I think Coleman's going to probably get a 3 or 4 year deal and probably get top of the line money for a running back at that maybe $7 to $8 million range. Which is a lot for a running back as well. So you got to make that decision. Maybe right. I think it's probably smarter to go in the draft and try to pluck some young talented guys out of there as well. But it all comes down to numbers. I mean, Bean has shown that he's an opportune guy. I think the contract that he signed Jordan Phillips to, the contract that he signed Spencer Long to, shows that he's pretty frugal when it comes to how he operates with these deals. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Really
savvy. I called him the contract wizard when he signed Spencer Long and the terms were released. It's like, 1 year he could make this much. The next year he could make this much if he does this, this, and this. I love that, though, because when we're signing free agents like that, like a Spencer Long, who does have something to prove based on his last stint not going so well, those are the type of contracts that should be written up.
Yeah, for sure. And, I remember when he first got signed, it was a 3-year deal, and everybody was like, is he going to be penciled in as a starter? And first of all, what have we learned about this regime? What have we learned about Sean McDermott? Nobody is penciled in as a starter on this team, except for maybe Josh Allen at this point, LaShawn McCoy, the guys, Tremaine Edmonds, the guys that are there that everything else is up for competition.
Trey White, right? Yeah,
exactly. The guys that are like the number ones at their position, yeah, obviously. But you bring in a guy like this, a journeyman offensive lineman, I wouldn't pencil him into anything. And then you talk about the contract; it's perfect. It's incentive laden. It's all about performance. They have an out after this year, team options in 2020 and 2021. It's a perfect kind of deal for a guy who may not be the ideal fit at center, but a guy that you might be able to, pencil in as one of your starting guards if you don't go that route in the draft or free agency, or you don't get a guy who's ready right away. So I think it's a guy that has versatility, same as a Jeremiah Searles, who has shown to have some versatility, maybe better at the guard spots than center, but center's a tough
probably the toughest position in the league, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's
outside of quarterback.
Outside of quarterback, yeah.
Right.
There's so much that's asked of you from a play calling perspective, and reading the defense and making sure everybody else in the line is in tune and knows what you're doing. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot to put on a rookie. It's a lot to put on. Sometimes it takes years. This is his third or fourth year in the league. So. Yeah, I think Brandon Beane's shown the ability to really get the job done from a contracts perspective, and he's done a good job in free agency and the draft. I mean, go back to last year, a lot of home runs in that draft already when it comes to later mid rounds. Taron Johnson, Harrison Phillips, guys that are looking like steals at the spots that they got them.
Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have drafted more starters in 2 drafts than Doug Whaley did in 4. You believe that?
Yeah, I mean,
I hate to say it, but
to be fair to that regime,
right?
This regime has done everything they could to get all those guys out of town to start their own kind of deal, which is
true.
Fine. I mean,
true.
That's how the NFL works. You want your own guys. It is funny.
As far as the final question goes, in terms of the Buffalo Bills, I know the offseason, it's just getting started. Next week is the start of free agency, but if you were to go as high as 100% thinking that the Bills would make the playoffs, or as low as 0% that they won't make the playoffs in 2019-2020 season, this next season, where are you at? Do you think the Bills can sneak into the AFC playoffs?
Hit me up in July, and I'll give you that answer. No, I mean, I think they have a lot of ingredients, but it's going to be about how do they use this draft capital? How many guys are ready to come in and contribute right away? You go out and you get a DK Metcalf potentially. Is he really ready to make an impact as a rookie? We'll find out. You go out and get even a Jonah Williams. Is he going to go out and be ready to really make an impact as a rookie? That's a question. And who do they hit on in free agency? Do they get a Darrell Williams? Do they lose out? Do they lose out on Paradise and Morse? Do they got to go out and maybe get a guy like Jawan James from Miami, who's kind of like that fringe guy, or Quentin Spain, who's another guy that's kind of on the end of the depth chart, if you will, for potential free agents. So, I think there's so much to see still. I want to see what they put around Josh Allen, what kind of moves they make. But yeah, I think that, I think no matter what they do, they're going to get coached up. I think that you can expect Sean McDermott to get the most out of this team. And if you're looking at a 6-10 team from last year and they build it even more this offseason, you have to think that they'd compete.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. My next question for you, we'll go back to MMA. Will John Jones ever lose? Actually lose, not a disqualification loss with the 12-6 elbows to Matt Hamill from back in the day. Will John Jones lose? At this point, it doesn't look like he's gonna.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's hard for me to sit here and tell you that guy is not the greatest of all time. I know that, people love to chat about the PEDs and all this stuff. And yeah, I get it. But from a physical perspective, look at the guys that he's fighting. I mean, I get it if there's advantages, and it is what it is. And, I'm not really after an hour of talking want to get into PED.
Yeah, and I'm not either. Yeah,
he is an unreal fighter. I mean, everything, just the way that you have to beat him, I really think you just got to catch him. So you think about who are the guys out there that can catch him. You're not going to out-wrestle him. You're not going to take him down and submit him. He in his 3 years of intermittent fighting, he's been becoming a jiu-jitsu black belt. So you're not going to take him down and submit him. So how do you beat him? You got to knock him out. Who can knock him out? Maybe this Johnny Walker with another couple fights. He's looked absolutely electric as he's made his rise here. I think he's still a long way away from the bright lights of John Jones.
Right.
I think John Jones would absolutely destroy Brock Lesnar to the point where I don't even want to see the
fight.
My
God, that fight's not even. I can't take Brock Lesnar seriously coming back to the UFC, to be quite honest.
I can take him seriously. I think it'd be fun, and I think that from an entertainment standpoint, I think it's entertaining.
But not against John Jones.
No, but then again, I don't really take many people seriously against John Jones. But right. I saw a story out there. One of my good friends from the UFC during my time there, I really took to Anthony Johnson. Spent some time with him. Yeah. When he fought in Buffalo, I came in for the tickets on sale tour with him and spent some time with him and Daniel Cormier, another guy who I'm a big fan of. And
I'd love to see him come back. Please,
I know.
Please tell me he's going to come back.
No, but I texted him when all this stuff was happening. I said, hey, screw titles, man. Like heavyweight, Anthony Johnson versus John Jones. And he said, yeah, that would be the fight. And he even came out and said it recently. If I were to come back, that would be the fight I would come back for. And sign me up.
Sign me up.
That's the kind of guy that I think, it would take to be John Jones. A guy that can, he's got a wrestling background. He can hopefully defend a takedown, keep it standing up. And for as long as it's standing, he's got a puncher's chance because there's not many people on this planet that can hit like Anthony Johnson. And you look at him now, I mean, he's ready to fight at heavyweight. And I think that would be the funnest place to have that fight. Or Cormier at heavyweight, I think could be interesting. I think John Jones is forever in Cormier's head. Mm-hmm. I don't think that, I don't know how much I want to see a third fight between them, but
I don't personally. I really don't. I love Cormier for all the reasons that everyone else loves Cormier. I feel like he's got a new lease on life at heavyweight. You just kind of, and he's a little up there now. He's 40 now? Yeah. Close to it. So, yeah. I mean, what were you saying? Not to interrupt you. My bad.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I think. I think that there's something to be said about a potential fight at heavyweight. Cormier is undefeated at heavyweight, but you look at the legacy like you're saying, and it's like, look, what happens if you fight that fight and you lose, and then you have this unblemished career except 3 losses to one guy?
Right.
I think that his win against Stipe Miocic is one of those wins I was talking about earlier when we were talking about Conor McGregor. It is an all-time
great win.
It is a great win. For as great as John Jones' career is, I don't think that there's a win on his resume that's as great and grand as Daniel Cormier is going up and beating Stipe when he beats Stipe. See, that's what some people don't understand about fighting. Sometimes it's about when you beat someone, too. Mm-hmm. Beating Jose Aldo now is a lot different than when Conor beat him.
Right,
Beating Stipe now is different than when Cormier beat him. So I think that, I think Cormier's done enough. I don't think he needs another John Jones fight for his legacy. I think that that's set. And I think that, Jones has, other fish to fry at this point. And I think that he will, I think there's a couple, I would have still loved to see Bader fight,
DC?
DC, yep. Obviously he's in Bellator now, and that's not going to happen. They had some nice tension there for a while. But yeah, it's a great question. Right now, I couldn't tell you who could be John Jones. I don't think that person exists currently.
I don't either. There's always someone, there's always that guy waiting to knock off the all-time great, and maybe that'll happen in the future, but as of now, I don't see it, personally. But hey, Matt, I really enjoyed having you on the show. We definitely got to do this again.
For sure, man. Doing some great stuff, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Definitely keep in touch. Go Bills. I'm very pumped up for this offseason, and I know you'll keep Bills fans up to date with all things this offseason.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. Take care. Matt Parrino, ladies and gentlemen, of NewYorkUp.com, as we talked some Buffalo Bills offseason, some UFC, MMA. Will John Jones ever lose? He says no, and I say no too. But a lot of interesting tidbits there to take away from that interview with Matt Parrino. Definitely a lot of stuff going on as far as the Buffalo Bills go. What direction are they going to go in? Whether it's free agency or draft. The free agency, one thing we do know is that free agency is going to tell us a whole lot about what direction the Bills will go in the draft. More they fill these positions, such as right tackle, with an addition like Darrell Williams. If they go wide receiver in free agency as well, maybe they'll go defense in the draft. It's going to be very interesting, and this is my favorite time and least favorite time of the year because I hate speculating. I want to get some concrete evidence. I like to get down to the nitty-gritty as far as what's going on with all of these things. A lot of storylines to keep our eyes on. Antonio Brown could possibly be traded as soon as this Friday. 3 mystery teams. One of those mystery teams, I tweeted out and also posted on the Thomas Tay Facebook page is the Oakland Raiders, per a very valid source inside the NFL, told me that the Oakland Raiders are very interested. And then it was reported by Ian Rappaport as well that the Oakland Raiders are very interested shortly thereafter, this afternoon on Around the NFL. We'll have to stay tuned to all things sports, whether it's NFL, mixed martial arts, NHL. I'm Ryan Thomas. MLB season starting soon as well. Fantasy baseball draft next week. I'll keep you guys posted on who I draft and why. Take care.